Dipti is here as well with the papers. Something completely different we're going to start with, which is always nice to do in the paper review. Alarming number of killings in the Philippines as part of a so-called war on drugs there.
That's right, Stuart. It's been a brutal, bloody and not so secret campaign that President Rodrigo Duterte has been leading since he came into office just 1 month ago. Look at this photo from L'Obs, which is the French website. You see hundreds of what looks like hundreds of prisoners here lying really like sardines in just one of many overcrowded Philippine prisons. And this is, a direct result of that so-called war on drugs. Now, President Duterte promised a, quote, bloodbath, and he's fulfilled that promise. That's what the website Vice is saying. For some figures, in 30 days that he's been president, at least 420 suspected drug dealers have been killed, a third of them by hitmen and the rest by police. Compare this to the first 5 months of 2016, before he became president, when 39 people were killed.
And it's these vigilante killings, really, that's causing outrage in the country now.
Well, the Philippine Daily Inquirer, it's one of the country's largest newspapers. They really lashed out at what they call these extrajudicial killings that so many people in the country are seeing sort of as justified. Some even saying that it's necessary to avoid being killed themselves in the war on drugs. Now, for this author who's penned this article, it's crucial that people rise up against this so-called war on drugs to avoid the Philippines from, first of all, becoming a police state, and most importantly, from normalizing this culture of violence.
Now, South Africans, they're going to the polls tomorrow. Now, this is in local elections, in fact, but some are calling them rather make or break for Jacob Zuma's ANC party.
The polls will be a battle for South Africa's crown jewels. That's according to the South African newspaper Business Day, Stuart. The ruling ANC party that's led by Jacob Zuma could lose key provinces, including Johannesburg, to the opposition. It's not a surprise then that the ANC is on Operation Save Jay-Z. That's what's on the front of the Mail and Guardian, the weekly edition of the Mail and Guardian.
And you found a piece in the Globe and Mail. Now, this is a Canadian paper that looks at just why these elections are quite so important.
Well, if the ANC party loses, then an internal revolt could force a deeply unpopular Jacob Zuma to quit. But on the other hand, if they do win these elections, he could reinforce his power and could further exacerbate corruption, economic instability, nepotism, and a whole host of other scandals that have sort of marred Jacob Zuma's presidential term. So, for example, just to give you an example, squabbles over nepotism within the ANC party has led to 20 candidates being killed. And yet their names will still appear on the ballot papers because the government hasn't had enough time to take them off the papers.
And Zuma even pandering to the race vote in a bid to hold on to power, the Globe reports.
Yeah, that's right. He's been pushing an explosive electoral campaign, one in which he describes the opposition really in apartheid terms. He calls them oppressors filled with hatred of blacks, for instance. It's a real far cry, Stuart, from the message of peace that Nelson Mandela promoted when he created the ANC party in 1994. Now, claims from the Electoral Board of fair and free elections tomorrow are really satirized by the cartoonist, South African cartoonist Zapiro. You see in this cartoon an official telling a poor woman how to get to the voting booth by passing the disused clinic, crossing potholes, going past a crack house and an open toilet. Really a comment on those populations, those living in impoverished conditions that are continually ignored until it comes to election time.
Going to end for you on an article from The Guardian. This is about how Pokémon Go and other games as well, it seems are rather reflections of social constructs.
This is a really fascinating insight, fascinating read that you can have a look at in The Guardian that could explain our craze for Pokémon Go, but also other games, Stuart. Basically, The Guardian writer says we turn to games as a form of escapism, quote, when real life seems so dark, and I think that really sums up what we're feeling now.
Sure.
The writer Arwa Madawi looks at how our fondness for games acts as, quote, cultural milestones. In the case of Pokémon Go, it's a real first global use of augmented reality in a game. But other famous games have also made their mark. Twister, for instance, the game where you place a hand or foot on a colored circle. It actually came out during the 1960s, during the sexual revolution, and was actually called Sex in a Box. That's how people referred to it. Tetris was released in 1984 by Soviet Russia and believed by many to be a Russian plot to, quote, lower worker productivity in the US.
Okay.
Monopoly, which turns even the most mild-mannered person into a greedy land-grabbing capitalist, I should know, was first released at the turn of the 20th century as a comment on social inequality. It was then re-released in 1935 in between the two wars, and it became the one we know today, as The Guardian says, a, quote, training ground for tiny Trumps.
I was just thinking that as you started to talk about it. We won't ask what Cluedo does either. We won't talk about that one. It's probably not ideal at the moment. Thank you very much, Tika Laurent with the papers and Stephen with Business on France 24. Very latest headlines for you straight after the break.